right, then let's start with our talk with the title From Using OKRs to Useful OKRs. And as already mentioned, we will not teach you anything out of our textbook. We will just make a case study how we use OKRs and what our experiences are with OKRs at willhaben. Okay, so what's coming up? First, we do a short introduction to our company and how we set up. Then we talk about our OKR challenges and key learnings, what we learned about creating useful OKRs. Then we have a special type of deep dives of 3 key result improvements. And we close the talk by talking about our honest challenges and learnings we're still facing and still improving. Who are we? I'm Andy, and these are my colleagues, Susanne and Nathalie. May you present yourself?
Hi, I'm Nathalie. I'm into HR since 2013, and at willhaben I'm now like a little bit more than 2.5 years.
I'm the newest agile coach at willhaben, and I started in January.
I'm the 3rd agile coach, and so we are all 3, the whole agile coaches in willhaben. And I started my agile journey 6 years ago, and yeah, the company I'm more than 10 years. Okay, to give you to understand the problems and challenges and learnings we had with OKRs, maybe you have to get some overview about our willhaben structure. So shortly, we have 4 verticals. They are also the entry point at our start page. They are mainly staffed with salespeople, and then we have some executive departments like product development, business development, and others. And these departments and the verticals have managers, and they create the guidance and for the quarterly OKRs and also the goals for the yearly OKRs. Further, we have in the product development, we have tribes. So they are set up according to a domain model and along the domain model boundaries. And they have 20 to 30 people each in these tribes. And they also, all these teams here use OKRs. So, and we call these teams organizational teams, organization teams in willhaben. Tribes are a little bit special, but to make it a little bit more complex, we can provide another type of team. It's the OKRs team. You can imagine these teams as a kind of a focusing or project team. So they are set up along the value stream. So they have certain goals they have to achieve from the management. They're framed by the yearly OKRs. And yeah, they are cross-department, as you see, and cross-functional. So there's every role they need for achieving the goal in this tribe. So some more numbers about willhaben and OKRs. So we are about 300 employees at willhaben. We have 30 teams. We have 20 organization teams and 10 of these OKR teams. And they are supported by 3 agile coaches. They are all here. And what's a little bit different to other companies is that we have no Scrum Masters in the teams, so it's just us. And we use OKRs for about nearly 2 years now. And we have it in one Google Sheet, the whole OKR sheets, and there are 84 sheets so far in this year. Okay. How do we set up our OKRs? So we call it a W process. That's mainly a double feedback loop. So it starts all with the guidance for a quarter, which is provided by the management. And then the teams create the first drafts according to this guidance and bring also bottom up their ideas in it. And they align it with other teams to which they contribute to or they have dependencies to. And then after about a week, the management gives feedback to these drafts, and then they adapt their drafts, align it again with other teams, and eventually they get a handshake with the management and also with the other teams. Yeah, and then the next OKRs quarter starts, and the teams run off to achieve the goals, and we have their weekly Gemba box. That's mainly a check-in, I guess. So it's where the teams have a 15-minute chat with the management, and they talk mainly about the KRs, so which actions they did in the last week and had effects on the KRs, and what they plan to do in the next week, and if there occurs a really big problem which cannot be solved by the team itself, then there's also the possibility that the team can escalate it to the management, and then they have to discuss how to tackle it the best way. Okay, and maybe, I don't know, who is familiar with OKRs? Who is using them? Okay, quite a lot, so it's kind of basics here, so I go very quickly over it. So we have the objectives. This is where the destination where we want to get. So it's phrased in a sentence, like, for example, home seekers choose us over competitors on sell option. Then we have these key results, the famous key results. They are, it's phrased in a metric. So always like increase or decrease something to get from a starting value to a target value. And this is showing us if we are progressing as we need it and if we're doing the right things. And then we have the initiatives. It's kind of a task list we do, or we think we have to do to affect the key results. And maybe that's a little bit special here. Then we also use health metrics, which are KPIs we monitor, but on them, we just act on them only if it violates a certain threshold. So you can imagine that as a vital signs tracker. So if the heart rate or the blood pressure is too high or too low or not in the range, I don't know, then you have to do some actions, go to the doctor or something like that. And that's the same idea here. So if maybe frauds per ads exceed a certain value, then you have to do something. And the main difference here is to the key results is the health metrics. The organization teams work mainly with these health metrics. So they hold some values or hold some values, and the key results we actively want to increase or decrease something and do certain actions for that. Okay, so this was the short introduction, and now Susanne, what we learned about creating useful OKRs.
Yeah, so as we said, it is a case study, so we try to bring you some learnings. We brought you 3 short challenges and what worked for us, and then we also prepared 3 really nice deep dives where we go, as announced, into the trenches and we look at how did we improve that. So the 3 challenges that we're often facing is to create a sense of ownerships for the teams, because of course there's a guidance from the management. But what worked for us is my colleagues worked really hard that there are no initiatives and key results in the guidance, but it really focuses on objectives. There can be some key results, but the ideal is that there are key results from the management and as well as from the teams. What we also explain to our teams that creating OKRs is a team sport, and a very hands-on tip is that we recommend to create the draft with some time in between, so create a draft, sleep over it, take some time, and then finalize it within the whole team. What we also learned that first OKRs it's really hard to do it for the first time. So we provide, of course, an onboarding, but one specific things that we learned is when we do the onboardings, we try to do a session where we have examples of bad objective and key results, and we practice with them how can you create good ones. The third one is tooling. So introducing the OKR methodology and at the same time introducing a tool that people have to learn, that people have to fill, is quite tricky. You might be wondering, yes, we really have just one Google Sheet where everyone has a sheet where we have all the OKRs. It looks kind of crazy, but it really works. It's open for everyone. And what we also learned through iteration is that we need to have an explicit space for contribution. So if you have a dependency to another team, may it org, may it OKR, you have to make this contribution explicit in both OKR sheets. So as I said, we wanted to bring you 3 of these short challenges and what worked for us, but the really cool part is we also brought you deep dives. And now here comes the fancy thing. So we do these deep dives in a performable role play. As they say in films, they are inspired by real life. So of course we took examples that you know, we took examples that are easily understandable and that are coherent, but we're currently really in the OKR process and we can tell you we actually use these currently every day. So just yesterday we explained it to some of our team leads. So let me introduce our protagonist. We have Leon. He's a new OKR coordinator. That means he's responsible that his team is creating a draft for this OKR's quarters, and he already received the management guidance. And then we have Franziska. She's an agile coach at willhaben, so she's coaching teams how to create better OKRs. She spreads OKR knowledge and skills throughout the whole organization. We will give you three examples. So we explain how we come from output-driven to outcome-driven key results. We explain the so-called key result baseline crutch, as well as its subdomain crutch. As for our first challenge, when people are kind of new to the OKR process, it's difficult for them to really create outcome-driven key results instead of output-driven key results. So to set the scene for you, Leon has just done a discovery phase. They want to implement a new feature. It's called Paylivery. You might know it if you use willhaben. So they know what they want to do, but he's never worked with objectives and key results before. He's asking Franziska for support. So who knows Paylivery? Yeah, so really amazing. We do it, so it helps private sellers to make safe transactions. What you do is essentially you pay for it, it goes to an escrow account at willhaben, and when the purchaser is satisfied and happy with the product, then they receive the money. So the goal is to implement these features. But let's see how the story unfolds.
Hi, Franziska.
Hi, Leon. How's it going?
Oh, thanks, fine. But I tried to define some key results for the Paylivery project, but I got stuck.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The thing is, we already had our discovery phase, and we already know exactly what we want to do. So we have just to build it and release it, and yeah, that's it. So I don't know if we really need OKRs here. So I came up with this Paylivery MVP is released from 0 to 1. No, it's not perfect, but maybe it's good enough. Can you help me?
Okay, so what do you think needs improvement here?
I know this key result should be phrased as outcome-driven. So I think we are more on the output side here.
Yeah, I think I would agree. So you measure 0 to 1, so there is no way to track progress during your project. And also, I think it's not really telling you if people actually like the new feature, right?
Concerning the progress, I've got an idea. We could split the whole project in user stories, and then we just count the user stories we already have implemented.
I really like that you are using user stories, but I'm still wondering, I mean, is this really outcome or is it output what you measure here?
I think if you ask that way, it's maybe again output.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, probably. So, you know, let's approach the whole thing from just a completely different perspective. Imagine the feature is released. What would be a very first and small indicator to you that your project was somehow successful?
First of all, we wouldn't release it to everyone right away, I guess. So
Okay,
maybe to some specific users we could release it, or so as a user segmentation, or even better, we could just roll out it or activate it in a certain category. Yeah, and then from there we wait for the first transactions and see if everything works fine. And yeah.
Okay, so the first transactions, interesting. So how could you put that thought into a key result?
Maybe 100 delivery transactions have been processed in category baby clothes.
But that sounds great.
From 0 to 100.
Yeah, that sounds great. And what's next then?
Normally, after a release, we have a close contact to our support team. So maybe we will monitor the support tickets related to the delivery transactions. Yeah, and we see if we have to improve there something. And if everything is stable, I guess we could activate it on more categories. So maybe we can write down number of delivery support tickets is less than X per week. And the second one, concerning the categories, increase the number of delivery categories from 0 to 5.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, I mean for the last part, you could maybe also use percentage instead of this absolute number. So let's imagine you figure out that in the end, after your project, you want to have delivery activated for, I don't know, 80% of your categories because, I don't know, for 20%, it just doesn't make sense, yeah? So you could use that number, yeah? So this 80%, phrase your key result as, increased percentage of the categories with the delivery feature activated to 80%, something like that.
Ah, cool. That sounds really cool. But I have to confess, I guess this will take a longer time, so maybe more than 1 quarter. So do you have an idea how we can track this over several multiple quarters?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine to, cut it into smaller pieces. So maybe in the first quarter you go from 0 to, 35, and then in the next quarter from 35 to 60, and then in the last quarter from, 60 to 80. So you can cut it smaller. Yeah, I think that's perfectly okay.
Ah, nice. So let me write that down. So what else?
Yeah, so I think we now have a way to track the release and the quality of your feature. And I mean, this is already much better than the initial one. But I'm still wondering if this is enough looking at the outcome. So when delivery is activated for those categories, what would indicate that customers really like the feature?
If they like it, maybe we should first ensure that they really use it. So
good point.
Maybe we could track something like tracking the number of daily transactions with delivery, and then we activate it in new categories. And this should also have a positively result or effect on the metric. So maybe we could write down increase number of daily transactions from X to Y. So and when everything is stable, I guess then we can actively ask the user if they like it and discover new ways how to improve it.
Yeah, I really like it. So, and I have the feeling now you're slowly getting the hang of it, right? So you have now 4 different things that you will measure. You have the number of categories, you have first the total number of transactions and later then the number of daily transactions, and all the way along you keep monitoring your number of support tickets, right? So how do you like your key results so far?
Wow, they are awesome. So they are much more showing us if we're on the right track or not. So
cool.
High five.
All right, so that was our challenge coming from output-driven OKRs to outcome-driven OKRs. As you see, we started with, release 0 to 1. We try to focus on small successes. We try to go from something we plan to do to something we plan to achieve. And we try to focus on the usage and not on the release. We are having different ways of getting there, so we try to look at reflecting what is success and what creates value for users. We are very often using this when onboarding new teams because they have the challenge of really understanding the difference kind of between what's output and what's outcome. But with a little bit of practice, people usually get the hang of it rather quickly. As for our second challenge, we're still with Leon, but Leon has changed his role. He is now in the newly formed fashion team. So maybe you should know that fashion is like really big at willhaben. We have like 2 million ads from baby clothes, sneakers, wedding dresses, everything you can find there. The scene that you're about to see plays when the quarter is like 2/3 over and the OKR process is beginning. So Leon knows who his teammates are. He knows what the guidance is. He knows so in which direction are we trying to move. And he has some experience, as you just learned, with OKRs. But he has a challenge of creating feasible metrics that you can already measure. And he has the challenge of creating a baseline. So let's see how this story unfolds.
Hi, it's me again.
Hi, how's it going?
Oh, thanks. I'm not the same anymore. I changed the team. I'm now at the fashion team.
Wow, interesting. Nice.
And we now try to do our first OKR draft, and I think we need help.
Okay, show me your draft.
Draft itself, maybe not. It's an empty sheet.
Okay.
So the guidance framed us that we have to increase the number of leads of our heavy sellers to protect our market position. So the problem is we don't know what heavy sellers are for us, so we didn't define them.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's why I wanted to ask if we just could skip the OKRs for 1 quarter and just go ahead.
Okay. Slow down, Leon. Yeah, so I understand. Your team was just set up. You don't know how to measure your most important KPI yet, and so you struggle to come up with some key results. I understand that, but key results are also showing you what is missing. So most obviously, you cannot measure one of your most important metrics yet. So what do you think you should start with?
Learn how to measure the metric.
Okay, and what do you need for that?
So already mentioned defining what a heavy seller is for us, maybe.
What else?
Yeah, a starting value and a target value, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know what these values are yet. So
yeah, right. So as soon as you will have learned to measure your metric, then everything will then be easier. But in the meantime, you could maybe help yourself with measuring your progress towards measuring your key result and defining the baseline. Okay,
so you mean I could write down something like increased knowledge for our user segmentation as a first key result?
Something like that, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, but I still don't have an idea what's the from and to value.
Yeah, I admit that's a little bit tricky. Maybe we have to, in the meanwhile, use something like a workaround, like Crutch, until you can then later define a really nice key result. So one thing that I could imagine is that maybe you just first make a list of all the things that you want to learn about your heavy seller. So what is a heavy seller? How do we define it? How do we define it in different categories? In which categories do we want to track it in the first place? Things like that. All that you want to learn about your heavy sellers, you compile a list of these things, and maybe you count them and make this as a key result Crutch just for now.
So my key result is then increase knowledge about our heavy sellers by answering X open questions from 0 to X.
Yeah, it's like a Crutch, but might work.
Okay, I will think about it. Thank you. Do you have another idea for another Crutch, maybe?
Okay. There is also the possibility of making a survey with your team. So you basically ask your team in a little survey about the confidence level they have about their knowledge about this heavy seller. So you do a first round of surveys, then you take the average of that, and then you set yourself a target value, and you repeat this survey like every week, and then you see if your confidence is increasing. Yeah, so that could also be something worth trying. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That sounds great. So I will try this.
Yeah, cool.
Okay,
Good luck.
high five.
So that was our second challenge. So when you just start out, you often do not have data, so you can't measure it yet. But of course, our goal is that your objective and your key results reflect the work on the metrics. It shows what you're working and it shows your progress. So we're defining the baseline. There's two ways, as I mentioned, you can do this, or that we often use. One is you have the number of open questions and see how many you answered throughout the quarter. And the second is you define a set of people who should give a confidence survey. How far along are we to certainty of how to measure the key result and how to define our key result for the next quarter. But we have one more challenge in store, which is another crutch. It's the so-called subdomain crutch. So we're still with Leon. He's still in the fashion team, so he made it through 2 quarters. His goal is to increase the visits and the leads of the fashion category. So they already have a metric, but every action they do does not really influence the metric much. So they're not quite sure that, the initiatives they're doing, the actions they're doing, do we really see this metric move throughout the quarter? And so their impact is really hard to measure. But let's see how the story unfolds.
Hi, it's me again.
Hi, Leon. How's it going?
Thanks, fine. I learned to measure the metric.
Yeah.
But I got a new problem.
Yeah.
So maybe I can tell you about it.
Yeah, we have to speed up a little bit, but yeah, just
Okay.
say it.
So in our team, we have the task to increase visits and leads over the year in the whole fashion category, in this whole big fashion category.
Shit. That sounds like a challenging task. Wow.
Yeah. That's quite challenging because we already know our certain first moves, and we are not sure if we can see, even if they are the right things, I'm not sure if we can see something noticeable on the measurement of the overall metric.
Yeah, so I see. So you now can measure your key result and your metrics, but maybe you will only see changes over the long run, maybe not in a quarter or so?
Yeah, as I mentioned,
Okay.
even if we do the right things, I'm not sure that we see anything.
Yeah, so for your product, what do you usually do when you want to figure out the next move?
Normally, I guess we would test an idea, I guess,
Yeah.
and see if it's the right one or discard it.
Yeah, so in the discovery phase, you have like the same problem. You have to first see significant changes to validate an idea, and how do you do that there?
I guess we would use prototypes. We would create the smallest and thinnest prototype we have, and then, it will reveal if users will use this feature significantly more or not.
And so for a prototype, you have something like an MVP or so. How do you define the scope for this?
I guess we look at a very small part of the platform. So and see if there are changes.
So how could you? That's interesting, because how could you transfer this way of thinking to the problem with your key result and this really blurry metric?
Maybe if there is this big category, maybe we could just have a look at a very certain subcategory. So and see if we see some movement at our metrics there.
I really like that idea, but I'm wondering, how can you then ensure that the changes in this subcategory are also the same, have the same effect, in the other categories?
I'm not sure if you do some changes in a certain subcategory that they will have the same effect on other categories. So maybe we should change the perspective on that and think it another way. So we could figure out what subcategories would have the biggest leverage.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
Even if we do the right things, then we have most of the best chance to see them moving the metric then, the overall metric of the category. So maybe it could be something like increase number of visits in subcategories sneakers, ladies fashion.
Yeah, I think that's really a nice idea.
Yay! Then let's do that. Thank you.
So in our third challenge, the key result was clear, it was measurable, but it is uncertain whether the initiatives will really move it regularly and in small intervals. So that's why we use the subdomain crutch here. So just like in defining MVPs, we look at a subcategory or a subsum or also a subset of users. And we see whether we can, adapt the key results to this. This allows you to kind of measure your impact, and then if you've managed to figure out how to move your key result in this subcategory, you can then transfer your learnings to other categories and make your key result broader again. So this concludes our role playing. Thank you so much to Leon and Franziska. I'm handing over to my colleague.
Okay, so I will now tell you a little bit about our learnings and our current challenges. So for the learnings, I've brought forward 4 different learnings. So the first one is onboarding new OKR teams takes time. Yeah? It takes time, it needs support, and it's really, really tough to onboard a lot of teams at the same time. Yeah? That's the first learning we had. The second one is about the maturity of specific OKR teams, and they also need time to learn. They need time to learn how to create good key results, how to have clear priorities, how to align the contributions and dependencies within the teams. And it's even more challenging if we ask them to do this without close coaching from us. Yeah? So this is a lot of learning for the teams. But also the management team needs time to learn. So they need time to learn how to craft a good guidance and clear priorities, which means that they rather focus on the objectives and then leave it to the team to think about key results and initiatives, instead of handing over a to-do list or a backlog of initiatives. Yeah? So this is also a learning curve for the management team. Yeah? And at willhaben, we always struggle with staying focused. Yeah? So during the last 2 years, we got really better with this, but we're still struggling with it. So we really try to have not so many things going on, decrease the WIP, the working process, for the number of OKR teams, the number of objectives, the number of initiatives. There is still too much going on, but we're better now than 2 years ago. Yeah, my colleagues are laughing, you can see them. But we still try to make it better. Yeah? So these were the 4 learnings that I brought here. And now I have brought 3 challenges that we currently together with our colleagues where we try to get better. And the first one is the onboarding of new OKR teams. So first of all, we are currently in the process to onboard all teams. Yeah? So we have already OKR teams, but we also want to have other teams that are not directly related to the OKRs yet, to also have them use this process. And this onboarding takes time. We try to improve it, and we also try to ensure that a newly formed team has enough support from us during the first 1 or 2 quarters. And then the second and the third thing, this is something where we observed something like an evolution of our OKR teams, and we see that very mature teams are doing those 2 things already, and we want to help other teams to also act in this way. And the first thing is encourage teams to push back. Yeah, so imagine the management is communicating the guidance, and the team thinks, okay, the scope is too broad, there are too many topics in there, the priorities are not quite clear. We see that mature teams, they push back. They draft a realistic scope. That sometimes means that they just remove unrealistic objectives or topics from the list, yeah, and they proactively ask the management for clear priorities. And we want all our teams acting in that way. And the third thing is then true collaboration. This is something that we observed recently with the more mature and more experienced teams. They are not waiting for the guidance. They are not waiting that the management is communicating the guidance, they approach management on time, right before they start to craft the guidance and give input to the management team regarding the guidance. They give something like recommendations, they suggest next steps, or they're not waiting for the guidance, but they're giving proactively input for the guidance so that the management team has then an easier job to craft a good guidance. Yeah, so these are the current challenges where we want to further improve. And that actually, concludes our talk. So that was our little case study about the OKR process at willhaben and how, about our challenges and our learnings and how we try to go from just using OKRs to really having useful OKRs. Thank you.